All right, Commissioner Hull, we are now streaming live to YouTube.
Great. I'd like to welcome everybody to the March 8th, 2023 Salem Public Art Commission meeting and call this meeting to order. We just introduce ourselves real quick. I'm Zach Hull, Commissioner and Chair.
Susan Napak, Vice Chair Commissioner.
Barbara Sellers-Young, Commissioner.
Spencer Emmer, Commissioner.
Keith Bondog-Wynn, Staff Liaison.
Tom Capani, Deputy City Attorney.
Carol, you're on mute.
Yes, Carol Snyder, President of Salem Parks Foundation.
Wonderful, thank you, welcome.
Krista Lauer, I just recently applied to be part of the commission.
Good afternoon, Krista, thanks for joining us. Okay, so Keith, you was there any public comment for this?
There was no official public comment. However, I did forward to the commissioners an email string I had with an individual. The topic came up previously. It was I guess a marketing request about putting together a painting and a puzzle. I brought it up to the commission at that time, and we decided that that was more of a Travel Salem endeavor. So I redirected that individual to Travel Salem. In the email, you see that he did contact Travel Salem and spoke with them, and now he's coming back to us for consideration. He wanted 30 minutes to be placed on this month's agenda. I said, that won't work, and let me talk to the commission. And so he provided a 3-minute video clip instead, or not instead, but in addition to, and I believe he would like to pursue some time with the commission, but that's really up to us. But he is welcome to bring it up during public comment. So that's what it was forwarded. But other than that, there's no public comment submitted.
Great. I did take a look at the video. I guess I don't know that it's something that SPAC would necessarily have a role in it, but it does seem to me like a sales pitch essentially to the city to purchase something for marketing or tourism purposes. But I guess he's welcome to put it into the public comments if you'd like. But I don't know if anyone else has comments on that.
I don't think it fits at all within what our purview is to have things in the public collection. I don't think we would have a jigsaw puzzle in the public collection necessarily. So I think I commend the guy. He's really kind of aggressive with his marketing, and he's really trying to get Salem to do it. I thought he said he had talked to Rotary. I didn't see where he said he had talked to Travel Salem, but I missed it in the email. But you know, if they're all turning it down in terms of a marketing device for Salem, I don't think we can help him in any way.
Okay, thank you for the direction.
Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to approving the consent agenda. We have a quorum for March 8th and the minutes of the January 11th, 2023 and the February 8th meeting, I think because we maybe didn't have a quorum last month, if that's, if I recall correctly. So I guess I'll move to approve the consent agenda and the minutes for January 11 and February 8th. Is there a second?
Nobody wants to do it. I'll do it.
Okay, great. All in favor? Or all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the discussion items on today's agenda. So last month we sent around for people to take a look at the City of Eugene's public art plan. And just to kind of set context again, you know, there's been a certain amount of conversation about how, you know, about sort of what is SPAC's role exactly, and what's our, you know, how can we engage with our communities? I think one thing we all see is that there's lots of different groups who are stakeholders who are interested in seeing public art flourish in the city of Salem. And one way that situation has been addressed in other cities is by the creation of this public art plan. So it's not, you know, it's obviously not within the authority of SPAC to create such a thing, but I think it's something that if we think is interesting, we could pursue recommending that kind of pathway to the city. So we had sent that around. Does anyone have did people have a chance to take a look at that, or have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was like, we don't need to reinvent the wheel when they've done so much work. I mean, this is, as Zach, you were saying, I think we had talked offline that they got an NEA grant to do this art plan, and it really shows that somebody put a lot of work and really dug really deep into what other cities are doing, what it would mean for their city. They did the survey, they have goals, they have priorities, and a lot of the things that I saw in there, I think this might have been, you know, previous to them having a public art collection, or it wasn't quite managed the way that we've already managed to manage our public art collection. So there's a big chunk of it that they hadn't accomplished yet that we have, but there's a lot that they have laid out here that I think applies to almost everything that we've talked about in our discussion. And I'd love to hear from, what was your friend's name, Zach?
Kate Ali, and
Yeah,
she's the public art manager for the.
I'd love to hear from her kind of an update. This was done, I think, in 2008 was the plan, and you know, what's happened since then, what they've achieved, what kind of roadblocks they've come up against, what their accomplishments have been. I'd really love to hear from her. And then I think, you know, I would love for whoever we have as our, you know, we had talked about having a counselor, someone from the council be a liaison to us, and also the city manager, have them take a look at this too, just to see what Eugene has done and what they've laid out, and kind of go from there. I mean, one thing that really impressed me was their goal, which was foster the arts and the development of artists and provide experiences which enrich and better the social and physical environment, which is not, you know, like our goal, if we have a goal or whatever it was that we're charged with, is really pretty narrow about the public art collection. And I think a broader goal that sort of echoes what they have is something that that I think the people of Salem might like to see the Public Art Commission do in the future. And also their community vision of temporary art installations, neighborhood grants to inspire residents to help commission and install their own art, just, you know, that reflects their community. I mean, these are things that certainly I've been talking about a lot, and I think it's all there in black and white. And so I just think it's like a treasure trove of information, and it's kind of all laid out there. I mean, I'm sure Salem will have its own unique take on things, but I think it's a great blueprint for us.
That's great. Yeah, I thought so as well. Did anyone else have a chance to take a look at it, or have any thoughts?
I put my thought in the chat. I'm sorry, I can't really talk because I'll cough.
Yeah, I saw that. And so Barbara, you had written that you looked at it and found it outlined a clear process. Yeah, which I agree with as well. So I did have a conversation with Kate to talk to her a little bit about whether or not she would be willing to or would it be appropriate for her to speak to us? And she said it would. So that's something she's willing to do. And she gave me a little bit of background, which I'll just share with you kind of briefly. She said that there was kind of a period where the city of Eugene was operating like we are, where they had a kind of ad hoc, they had a committee, but there wasn't a coordination across these different stakeholder groups. And that the shift occurred for them with the initiation of what she called a cultural policy review by the City Cultural Services Group, which came up with that was a city-led initiative that came up with a position of Eugene's relationship to the arts and outdoors. And that led them to apply for an NEA grant, which was for infrastructure building. And in drafting that grant, they relied heavily on the AEP, which, if you haven't looked at it, is the Arts and Economic Prosperity Study that's published by Americans for the Arts. And it has a lot of really good data about economic benefits of arts for municipalities. And so that's something that is worth taking a look at its own right. I can send that around afterwards for folks to look at. But leaning on that data and research, they were successful in getting the NEA grant to develop the plan. And then that plan development, it included drawing together a lot of the stakeholders for the city, which is, I think, kind of the stage maybe we're at now, is trying to identify who the stakeholders are and how to develop lines of communication. And then what Kate kind of laid out was the path that the city of Eugene had followed in order to get funding for the creation of this public art plan. And then kind of relying back on the stakeholder group to confirm that the city was interested in moving forward with it. And eventually that led to, a paid position under that cultural services group to be this kind of coordinator and operator of the plan. So that's a little overview of how of the history of how that came to be in Eugene. Again, I think Kate's willing to speak to us about it. We can talk more about that when we get down to new business. But so yeah, again, at the end of this meeting, I'll send the link to the AEP. You can also search for it. It's Arts and Economic Prosperity 6 is the current iteration of their study. It's a good thing to take a look at. It kind of closes some of the gaps between tourism and other economic developments, and how a city might view the value of public art in that context, in the sort of economic context.
Yeah, Zach?
Yeah.
I believe that there was a survey done in Salem through that art and economic development. I don't know if it was the last year or the year before, because I was given some of the documents to hand around to people who were coming to any events that we had, the neighborhood association. It was primarily geared toward people who were coming in from out of town, attending events. So I don't know if it was the exact same thing, but I don't know if there are results from that or not. Keith, do you know anything about it? Or
Yes. The city's, I think, community development, or Chris Snyder from that works for the transportation occupancy tax and travel Salem. They were involved with it. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. But I went to a recent filming last month of Buffalo Soldiers at Willamette University, and the survey was distributed amongst the audience with a QR code, and it talked about, did you spend money coming to a restaurant tonight? Did you plan to buy groceries on your trip during this visit? Things like that. So it was part of that AEP done last year, and I guess continues now.
Yeah, it's interesting. Kate did note that her position is funded by 1% of Holt Center profits and by the transient room tax. So
yeah,
they clearly linked that position to, I guess, at least event-based, if not out of town, commerce coming in and coming to the city. So another piece of the puzzle for us to think about. So Keith, I guess I think we could use some support from you or staff or Tom's commentary, I guess, about we talked a little bit last time about the best way to, engage with the city on this kind of recommendation or providing this kind of information for consideration. I know we talked about maybe having the new city manager attend one of our meetings. I don't know if that would be an appropriate place, but if you could, you don't have to do it, right now in this meeting, but if you can maybe help us understand the best way to engage with the city, that would be useful. Okay. Anyone, any other comments on that at this time? Moving on to the, we have been working on community survey questions. Keith, can you tell us sort of what the status is, where we are with that?
Yes, I emailed the list of questions that were provided earlier. Commissioners were going to look at the Eugene's public art plan and look at the survey questions that they gleaned, or the answers that they gleaned from their survey, and see if we wanted to incorporate those changes into our set of questions. But I think generally speaking, I think the idea was wanting to hold off until we got a clear kind of distinction is if we're going to continue with that, the neighborhood outreach. I think that was the question we're going to answer first.
Yeah, I would recommend that maybe we table for a while the survey and even the slideshow for what we're going to go, until we get maybe a better handle after we hear from Kate and talk to the city manager and get a counselor, engaged, so that we kind of know what we're talking about. I mean, I guess we could just go around and talk about the collection, but it also might be good just to have a little more under our belt for what might be happening with the commission in the future before we go out and start talking to the communities. I don't know how anyone else feels about that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, if we can kind of, with Keith's help, figure out the best way to kind of talk to the city, that would probably help us a little bit with this. One thing Kate did say was she said that the most important part for the city of Eugene was building the stakeholder base and really developing a feeling that it was something that was wanted by the citizens of the city, which to me means there's a link between the questions in the survey and the feedback we get from city leadership. Who are the stakeholders? How do they view this idea? What kind of support from the community would need to be documented to kind of, help this effort come to fruition? So that may inform some of those questions in ways that I guess I can't quite anticipate right now, but.
Okay, I'll be happy to table these until we get further direction. Chair Hull, maybe this would be a good time. You mentioned city leadership and direction about the opportunity that was presented to the Salem Arts Commission for sitting on the public panel for the selection of the deputy city manager overseeing the public art fund or the public art commission.
Mm-hmm. So that was something you had sent to me. Was that, and I had said I would happily do that. Is that what we're talking about? Just
yes.
Yeah. Is that a forum where there's an opportunity for me to talk about these issues, or is that more of a listening? And
I think it's more of a listening and getting an idea of the candidates for the position.
Okay.
A lot of the commissions under which that new group will be responsible for are sending representatives to that community panel. So you'll be one of them. And I think that might be an opportunity for you to hear about, their ideas or ask questions about, our specific or this group's specific interests.
Okay. And just for context, and I don't have this top of mind, but what I think, if I'm paraphrasing it correctly, there's a deputy city manager. Is that the position that's being filled, and the chairs of different committees from around the city are being asked to come together and into a kind of essentially a selection committee. Is that what it is?
Yes, it's a public forum, public committee, so that the groups understand who is going to be managing their programs and working with them.
Okay.
Mhm.
So I'll be representing SPAC for that. It's a day-long event. I don't recall the date, but maybe if you can remind us. And Susan,
Yeah. Let me get the
From
date.
what I understand that I heard from the neighborhood association chair meeting that I went to, this is a new position. It's never been really done before. I think he's got does he have a couple of them? Couple of deputies, I think, that are going to be covering various areas. And I think, I'm just surmising that it's going to go along with some reorganization of the way things are going to be under what headings in the city. So it's nice to know that that there's going to be somebody, right, that reports to the city manager that's going to be, knowing what's going on with the commissions. And it might be a really good opportunity if there's somebody that has any kind of arts background, you never know.
Yeah, so to clarify, the city's current organization there's two deputy city managers, one for enterprise services, which is IT, fleet, facilities, HR, risk, customer services, and DEI. And then the other deputy city manager is over community services, which will oversee library, parks and recreation, Center 50 plus, public art, neighborhood associations, youth services, homelessness and unsheltered, and ADA.
Wow, that's a lot.
That's a lot. So we're part of that group.
Okay.
Thanks for clarifying that, Keith.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I guess that we're tabling then the survey questions and the slides for now pending. Can you remind me the date? Sorry, Keith, for that meeting.
Yes. I'm sorry. 1 second.
It's in April, I believe. Is that right?
Let's see. It's actually scheduled for Monday, March 20th.
Oh, it is. Okay, good. So it'll be before our next meeting.
Yep.
Okay. Great. Okay, well, then I think that brings us to updates. Tom, thanks for joining us. I think we had some questions about proposed code change language. Maybe Keith, you can reorient us on this topic. I think this is around murals and non-flat surfaces. Is that right?
Yeah, I'll tee it up for Tom. Last year we had an application for a mural come through the Public Art Commission, as outlined in our city code. And then at the 11th hour, the group decided to only apply to paint the flat surface of the building that is part of the tax lot. The decision was made because they chose not to wait for the city's legal team to review the complete language in the code for murals. Anyway, Commissioner or Susan, not Susan, I'm sorry, Linda Nishioka, Councilor Linda Nishioka, presented I guess direction to council for for staff to look into code changes to allow for the murals to be placed on storage buildings like the water or silos on adjacent to the main building at the Cherry City Growers. Okay, Tom, I think I did okay. Now Tom has the new language. Sorry about that, guys.
Right, so at the end of the packet of materials are the proposed code changes. And the two areas of controversy that seem to come out of that application was whether or not a storage facility like a silo or a grain bin would qualify as a building. And there was some question about whether or not if the surface was curved rather than being just a, you know, a wall type surface, whether that qualified as a two-dimensional depiction. And so these code amendments seek to clarify those issues. So first, the change to the definition of building, or actually adding a definition of a building to chapter 15, which means that a building is a roofed walled structure for permanent use intended to support sheltering, storage, or occupancy. So that'll cover things like grain silos and water towers and some such things. That, and of course, regular buildings. And then paragraph K clarifies that a public mural is a two-dimensional relative to the plane of the wall that the mural is fixed on. So if you've got a curved wall, if it's on the X and Y axes of the wall, then it's two-dimensional. This language was originally written so that there wouldn't be things that would project out from the wall, some sort of mixed media type thing. So quite frankly, I'm not sure that the second amendment is really necessary, but there was debate within the department about what two-dimensional work of art meant, and so this clarifies that a curved wall doesn't disqualify something from being a mural. So they're relatively straightforward changes and eliminate any ambiguity about those issues. On that mural project, one of the issues that came up but may not have been completely described by the folks involved was the fact that the easement that was granted only granted the easement to that two-dimensional wall. And so as we were reviewing the application, we realized that the easement for the full 3-building mural didn't include the other 2 ancillary buildings. And so that was another reason why the mural got restricted to just the one big wall on the side of the warehouse.
Thanks, Tom. There's you probably caught this. You might have a word missing in paragraph A. You might, relative to the plane of the wall upon which the mural is affixed.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that maybe you want to put a which in there.
I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah. Susan, did you have another comment? I think I saw an email from you, maybe.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify if this means that going forward, murals can be done without being adjacent to a flat wall on surfaces such as water towers and electric boxes.
Well, so we'll have to evaluate each thing as it's proposed. I'm not sure the utility thing qualifies as a building. Certainly the water tower would.
I'm just wondering if it makes sense. I mean, you guys are the lawyer language guys, but if in the future, Salem wanted to have a program, where utility boxes or electric boxes like that would get painted, would that mean having to revisit the code again in order to change it to accept something like that? And does it make sense to maybe address something like that.
Yeah,
To
that,
staff time and energy to have to go back and revisit it again.
well, yeah, we always have to be careful of missions creep. In this situation, we were asked to sort of solve the problem of whether or not a silo or a tower would be a building, and so these amendments are designed for that. And so if it comes up later that somebody wants to start putting murals on electrical boxes, there's a whole host of issues that have to be solved, legally, because those utility boxes are typically not owned by the city, and we have to look at how they're there and what legal grant of authority the utility has for placing those things there. And so we're gonna leave that for another time.
Yeah, okay. There are just, as a point of interest, there are cities across the country who do that all the
Sure.
time. So I'm sure there are rules that are, or whatever could be looked at to figure out how to do that in Salem. So that I understand that, so if at this point, if this language goes through, then a water tower would be considered a roofed and walled structure that could accept a mural painted.
Well, again, I want to be careful and not prejudge. I mean, we'll have to look at the specific circumstances and how the thing is being used and whatnot. So if it's being used for storage, then I think it would qualify, but we'd have to look at it.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tom.
So what will happen is this will get presented to City Council sometime in the future with a staff report. And typically, we ask SPAC for a recommendation from them saying that encouraging the City Council to adopt these changes. That was not really part of the agenda at requesting that, so maybe we've got to save that for the next meeting. But typically, the council will want to know what SPAC's position on a change like this would be. So
I don't see why we couldn't do it now. Zach, what do you think?
Yeah, we can sort of fold it into new business, I think.
okay.
So let's table that for a second and then come back to it, or let's just do it now since we're talking about it, I guess. What form does that recommendation need to take? Is it a written letter?
It can simply be an oral motion on the part of the commission saying that they recommend to the City Council that
They adopt these changes.
they adopt these changes.
Yep.
And then that recommendation will be memorialized in the minutes, and then that can be referenced in the staff report.
Okay. Does anyone, I mean, I'm prepared to make that motion. Does anyone have any comment on that before we do that?
Yeah, just probably better sooner than later so that the artists can get to work on that mural as soon as possible.
Yeah. Okay. I move that the Salem Public Art Commission recommend to City Council to adopt the changes that we've been discussing here today in the code that would allow for a clear definition of buildings and the relationship between artworks on those buildings. Does anyone want to second that?
I'll second it.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So that'll be Tom, so they'll discuss that at their next, or whatever the appropriate meeting, and we'll hear back.
Yes, whenever staff gets a report together and gets it on the agenda, so we just had a council meeting this Monday. Is that right, Keith?
Yep.
So I don't know how quickly we'll be able to get that. It'll either be the next meeting or the meeting after that.
Okay, updates on SPAC vacancies.
Yes, thank you, Chair Hull. We have 2 vacancies currently on the board or in the commission. I recommended to the boards and commissions Krista Lauer to be part of SPAC as a member experienced in museum curation, art restoration, or art appraisal. I also recommended Olivia Munoz. She attended a previous SPAC meeting to be part of SPAC as a member experienced in landscape architecture, real estate development, or community foundations. She's currently this dean of students at Willamette University and has been involved with arts as well. The city council will be meeting on March 27th, and this is as soon as that they can approve of these new appointees. And so once they are approved, they can attend the April meeting in person for the first time with all of us as a new commissioner.
No, that's
And
great.
we'll have a full board.
That'd be great.
Fantastic. That's really exciting.
Mhm.
That's a good update.
Yep.
And I support those 2 candidates that you recommended. So thank you, Keith.
Thank you for recommending them or encouraging them to come on board.
Well, and that dovetails nicely into our next item, which is April's in-person SPAC meeting, which I'm looking forward to meeting everyone.
Yes. I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with where we are located. I'm sharing screen here. We are located, our address is 555 Liberty Street Southeast. So if this is a Salem Amphitheater, here is Civic Center. And that's where we are. So it's room 325, and you will have to check in at the front desk. And the meeting room will be right in the entryway. You'll see it. I'll be welcoming you all there.
Great. And it's the same time as the meeting is currently.
Correct. It's 2:30 to 4:30.
Great.
Is it the same location as it was previously before the pandemic?
I'm not sure where that location was previously. But if it's a traffic control room or civic center or city hall, it is the same location.
Okay.
Yep. And I will send out an invite to you all with the physical location in the email and whatnot. And I will also be posting this online or the meeting packet and agenda a week before so the public can attend. So there will not be any public testimony or comments or anyone coming in online. It'll just be all in person, but we will be live streaming. Okay.
Great. Okay, moving on to maintenance updates. First of which is for Equitas at the police station. We had previously approved some budget to address the damage that Keith is showing us right now.
So here's the damage. What was reported was it looked like someone took a hammer and just started going at this. And so there was a quote for an outside company to do it for like 7,300 or 7,200. City crew said we can do it for 1,200. And so they sent me these updated photos of their work repairing them and the completed project. So it was right here. It's a police car.
Great. Well, thank you too.
That's great.
So thank you for helping manage the collection.
Yeah, and thank you for the city crews for doing that. That's great.
Yeah, really,
Yeah.
big thank you. Buy him I don't know, pastry.
Is that a motion? No, I'm kidding.
Motion for donuts to be sent over.
Donuts, yeah.
I will let the staff know.
Yeah, thank you.
The Waldo Stewards repair that is at the Parkade downtown. I spoke with the facilities supervisor, and they are going to reapply anti-graffiti coating when the weather gets warmer and drier. But right now the graffiti has been removed. It's just not putting on the coat yet.
Right.
And there's no update on the good sense. Like I said, I've arranged a time when the water truck gets hooked up to take some of their time to clean it up, and I will contact Chair Hull to help with the cleaning.
Right. No problem. Sounds good.
Okay.
So moving on to new business. So we talked a little bit about inviting Kate. I guess I'm wondering if, and this is maybe dovetailing back, Keith, to my question for you. You know, I think it'd be interesting for all of us to hear her feedback and her story about how that came to be in Eugene. I wonder if that's something that might also be interesting to other stakeholders, maybe the city manager, or, you know, because it's kind of part of this storytelling around the recommendation that we want to make. And so I kind of wonder about the timing of that, and if it can be done in such a way that we could invite some other people to come to that meeting, if you feel like that's appropriate. So I guess I'm kind of linking that back to what's the best way to communicate this recommendation to the city, and could we, in tandem with that recommendation, maybe invite some people to come and hear from Kate. Because I think it's, you know, it's one thing for us to kind of say, hey, look what they're doing in Eugene, but it might be interesting to hear, you know, directly from them about that program and how it works and how it came to be. Do you think that would be possible?
So Commissioner Hull, I think, well, is it more like you wanted to be meeting with the library and invite the arts community to hear this, or were you thinking just like the city manager as an ex officio coming to one of the talks? If you're looking for gathering stakeholders, maybe a wider audience of
Yep.
the region would be appropriate, and we can definitely help finding a venue, you know, at the library or, you know, somewhere, you know, on city property or elsewhere.
I mean,
It's
I
really up
think
to you.
I think in particular, whoever, and you know, and I guess I'm not clear, is there already someone serving as the deputy city manager in the community services role?
The closest people in the city manager's office would be Courtney Knox. I think
Okay.
she's helping oversee that recruitment process as well.
So yeah,
Do you anticipate hiring this deputy city manager? Do you know do they have a time frame for that?
They're having the community panels on the March 20th, so they're in the process of interviewing candidates. So I don't know when the hiring but is.
As impatient as I feel to kind of get this all moving, I wonder if we should wait until that person is in place so that they could also benefit from hearing that.
promise you've got your hand up.
Yes, I think the timeline for having a new deputy city manager online is sometime midsummer, coinciding roughly with the beginning of the fiscal year in July.
Okay. So
A lot. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. What do other people feel like? Do you want to? I think there's. I mean, I've kind of summarized a little bit of what my first meeting with Kate was like. She had suggested that maybe her boss might be interested in coming as well. So I kind of, you know, I feel like that's going to be an interesting conversation, an opportunity to ask questions, and I would like to get as many people in the room who would be able to hear that as possible. And so, I guess I'm echoing, you know, what Susan said is I think it's great for us to hear it. I think it would be especially if this new deputy city manager who's going to be leading this community services group that would oversee arts and parks, which is I think another stakeholder, library, which is obviously another stakeholder, they're a venue. So there's like a number of existing stakeholders in this conversation that are all already kind of in the room. And this new deputy city manager would be obviously somebody who's as an audience that would be, I think, appropriate for this, to hear this. So I guess I would like to wait and try to invite that person to hear this dialogue. And I don't know, is that a SPAC meeting? Is that the right way to do it, or is this a different kind of meeting? Is that what you were suggesting, Keith? Like a broader
A
audience?
broader, Yep.
Yeah. So I guess if we could have a little guidance on what is that meeting? How does that meeting get characterized? You said on city property. I agree that would be a nice, like, to cast the net more broadly as a sort of, here's what other cities are doing to manage public
Yeah.
art, and try to get a bigger audience to hear from them. And
Okay.
Bronco.
Yeah, I think part of our idea was to reach out to other arts organizations and to the communities. And I think the more people that could hear about it, the better. And then we could, there was a meeting of SPAC a number of years ago. It was a public meeting. It was at Pringle Hall, and I understood it was going to be done on an annual basis to invite the public to come in and hear about what SPAC is and what we do, and to get some feedback and get some people involved. I wonder if that would be something like that it could be a public meeting like that. And of course, we'd make sure that the stakeholders, I like that word, Zach, that they would be there too. I don't know if that's reaching too far or.
Well, I think there's probably be room in that meeting to talk about SPAC and what it does, talk about the Salem Public Art Collection and how SPAC manages that's there for the benefit of the community, what it is, where it is, how you access it, what we're trying to, what we do as SPAC, and then there's some opportunities to coordinate across these different stakeholders and how other cities have done that. And then we would hear from our guest speakers, if I were to kind of spitball the agenda. Thomas, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, so one way to handle this would be that, we have a special SPAC meeting where the agenda is taken up, for these particular issues. And, there's a discussion and folks are invited to the meeting and invited to participate. And you can talk about, what SPAC's currently doing and, questions about, does the city government have a wider role in promoting public art? And, how does that wider role occur here in Salem? And so it's either that, or another way to handle this would be, gathering information amongst yourselves and then coming up with a proposal that you could present for discussion with, the city manager, with the director. I mean, currently it's Public Works, but if SPAC gets reorganized into a different department, maybe that director. Just from a strategic standpoint, it's really the commission's decision, because there is this other reorganization going on, because there is going to be this new person who's going to be overseeing this, probably letting the dust settle on that, and then coming in with, this idea of, well, we want to expand the scope of SPAC. That might be the best way to ensure success, but that's just me sitting on the sidelines trying to think the process through. It's by no means the way you have to do it, or if you feel strongly another way.
Yeah. So let me say that back to you. And I'm not sure it's necessarily expanding the role of SPAC, or if it's engaging the city in a city-led creation of a public arts plan that SPAC would have a role in. So that's, I guess, more how I'm thinking of it. So it's not SPAC needs to necessarily do this, but that other cities have developed a more comprehensive way of thinking about managing public art. And they, the city of Eugene also has a SPAC analog. So SPAC could continue to exist more or less as it is, but there could be this other way of thinking about engaging with public art and stakeholders. So I hear you. What I'm hearing you say is timing might matter here, to let that new person have a minute to kind of get in their spot. I guess I'm inclined to do both things in the right way, which is to have a proposal maybe, but give stakeholders an opportunity to hear from the people who have successfully implemented this somewhere else. And I don't know if that precedes the proposal or follows it. I guess we can keep talking about that, sort of what's the best order. But I do think it would be interesting to give other people the opportunity to hear from Kate, just because, she's a very professional and well-spoken person, and that program's been very successful in the city of Eugene, and they figured out how to fund it, and they've tied it to tourism, and there's a lot of mechanisms there that just might be interesting for people to hear. So there's not a reinvention of the wheel, or how could we ever do this? It's like, maybe like this.
And then it also gives the stakeholders a chance to give their input. They may have ideas that, didn't happen in Eugene that you would like to add to your proposal. And so that way it's a way to generate buy-in as well.
Exactly. So I guess I feel like maybe the stakeholder, because ultimately it would be nice if that proposal was supported by more stakeholders than just SPAC.
Sure.
And so maybe that meeting, this broader meeting would happen first, and then a proposal could get drafted that different groups could support. So it was not just SPAC making the recommendation, but maybe SPAC and library and parks and whoever, which might be more, obviously that's going to be more impactful if there's more support for it. So maybe that, I guess that suggests then, if this new deputy city manager is not going to be in place until midsummer, that we would maybe engage with that person after they've had a minute to be in their role, and to kind of suggest or lay out this approach so that they're not hit by it, without some collaboration, and then try to plan this this forum or whatever, this expanded meeting concept for a few months after that, and then have the culminating deliverable be a proposal that hopefully could be supported by more than just SPAC. Does that sound like a reasonable pathway?
So do you think that, we put off Kate coming to speak, or we maybe have her speak to whoever's in place at the moment, and then sort of, let things gel and then, come up with our own sort of ideas about it, and then work on a proposal that we could then, sort of present and discuss with the new city manager? Or you were thinking putting everything off until the manager's in place?
Well, I heard what Tom said about there's a lot of transition right now, and letting the dust settle might be advantageous to getting everyone's attention and buy-in. And so I think I'm proposing that we would wait for the new person to be in that leadership position, and that we would invite them to the table to hear this, to have a line of communication with them about this idea, and then to invite them or find a time when they could attend this meeting that Kate could also attend and hear that kind of feedback, and hear the questions that we would ask, and have the opportunity to ask them questions themselves, and whatever. And we would invite parks, and we would invite library to that meeting as well. And then following the outcome of that, we might take the lead of trying to draft a proposal, which would include, pursuing an NEA grant and leaning on the AEP, and, trying to it would be a very high level kind of prestige of what we would be eventually developing, and see if that document could get supported by these other stakeholders, and then have that ultimately be a proposal. I think probably the subtext of this conversation is this is going to take a minute to get it right. But that's okay, because if to be successful, it really does need the support of multiple stakeholders. And so if we can get that right and we can get people engaged, then it'll have a better chance of success. So I can be patient for that, I guess. So that's my proposal for now. But we could ask Kate to speak twice. It's just, I kind of don't want to burden her too much to,
Yeah, no, I agree. I just hope that there's certain things that we could do in the meantime about, letting the public know about the Public Art Commission and the social media things that we were planning, just to kind of keep
I think
things
we can do that.
in the air, so that, that we don't just put everything on hold.
I agree with that. I think we can. I think the earlier plans that we had about just kind of communicating about the collection to people are well within our realm of responsibility, and some featured artwork, and letting people know about the collection, how to access it, and where to find it. I think that's all stuff we should probably resurrect for the next quarter, while the city finalizes their leadership plans, and then we can kind of come back around to this higher level thing.
Is it potentially something that we bring to like the Salem Arts Fair? Have a booth of some information to just bring up, like, hey, this is what's happening this past year, this is what we're hoping to do, just to get it out with people that are interested in art. That's probably the biggest one in town. I know that's a ways out, but
yeah, I just thinking strategically about sort of the questionnaire and public support. We're going to need that for sure. I think we should be careful to do it in a way that doesn't alienate any of the other stakeholders or leadership, so there's not a feeling that we've whatever, that we're and running them or something. And so when I don't know, I think that maybe that we need to talk more about that, sort of, if a questionnaire is going to go out now or soon. I think it's maybe should be more oriented towards trying to gauge the level of public support for increased coordination across public arts stakeholder groups or something. I mean, that's obviously a mouthful that's not going to lend itself to soundbite questions very easily. So we'd have to figure out how to kind of break that down. But that data is going to be important as part of our proposal. So prior to delivering a final proposal, I think we do need some sort of data. And so like having that type of questionnaire available at an art fair, we could do an email version, then we could do an in-person version to try to continue to gather data showing that, this is something that the community is interested in, because that ultimately, is going to be necessary for this to succeed. Like, people don't want to do stuff if the community doesn't support it. Yeah.
Spencer, did you have more to say?
Oh no, I was just thinking, I mean, I just kind of threw that out there. I agree with you, Zach, on probably the initial develop it, but I think if we're developing it, it might be an appropriate timeline for us to reach out to the public then, where you could put that at the entry where people are accessing, like, hey, can you fill out this quick questionnaire? It's going to help the development of art in our community.
Yep. I think that framing is great. I don't know that we'd want to say, do you support this proposal, or here's what we're trying to do, but more just sort of create the foundational evidence of support for the kind of thing.
Yeah.
It does sort of raise the question, though, even without the questionnaire, whether we want to be more out there in the community with, it sort of goes along with the with the social media posts. I mean, Keith, I don't know how many of the brochures and the maps are left about public art collection. I had a stack. I've always taken, I think it was Heather had given me a stack of them, and I put them out at neighborhood association meetings and when we're at the Saturday market and whatnot, and people scoop them up. I mean, they're really interested in knowing more about the collection and where it is. And it could be a booth, where we could just be handing out, talking about the collection and handing those out, or at least having the brochures available to the public, even before we're ready to do the questionnaire.
Yeah, I have a whole box of those brochures that is so relevant. And we talked a few months ago about creating a QR code for a sticker to be placed on these brochures to direct the people to the new site. I got the QR code created. I just haven't pulled the trigger on getting it printed and stuck on there. So if that's the wishes, then I can go ahead and do that. And then give it to Irma for handing out to her neighborhood associations when she goes to those.
So if we had a kind of two-part goal of like just generally working to raise the awareness of public art in Salem through these brochures and maybe through going to neighborhood association meetings and through some emails or some social media work, which if I remember correctly, not to put her on the spot, but I remember Krista saying that she was an expert at such things. And since she will soon be joining us, yay, that would be, so maybe that we could do that in tandem with her joining. But then I feel like maybe we need a subcommittee. I know a subcommittee existed prior to my tenure, but or like the library or that kind of thing for working on this questionnaire, maybe more directly. Because I feel like if we can, between now and the appropriate time after which the new deputy city manager has been in place, if we could have this questionnaire be out everywhere, if we could send it out on social media, if we could hand it out in person at events, if we could, the more data we can collect that shows their support for this kind of programming, the better it will be when it comes time to eventually compile a proposal. So I guess that creates, in my mind, some urgency to get the questions right and done so that they're ready for various, whatever kind of applications we can, every channel we think we can get that questionnaire out on, maybe we should.
Yeah. I was a little confused, Keith, you were saying that the questionnaire could only be like yes or no answers or multiple choice. So that's what I had added.
So yeah,
Agree, disagree, strongly agree, which isn't the best way to do it.
no, and Commissioner Sellers Young also brought that to my attention that the yes/no survey questions are not really detailed. But when listening to Trevor Smith, who came and presented, the program for the questions doesn't allow it for searching like long answers, like text answers. I mean, there's ability for you to search the comments, but to get a lot of information, you just want the multiple choice or ones that they can easily select. And so that's why I organize it in such a way. But I mean, if there is like essay questions you want to ask, we can surely ask that. It's just gleaning usable information from that might be a little difficult in such a shotgun approach survey. But
yeah, it was just, if you look at the Eugene questions, it was, they're saying, what are the best ways? Well, a lot of them look like they could be multiple choice.
yeah. But maybe Krista could help us with that.
Yeah.
In terms of social media and what's really effective in asking.
Yeah, I think if we could try to define the question set, which is in turn going to mean defining kind of, I mean, not that I don't want to create the impression that we're leading people to a predetermined answer, but what kind of data are we trying to, what questions are we trying to answer? And do we have those questions clearly defined in our minds? And then are the questions we're asking likely to give us the data to answer those questions? And so I don't know if we have consensus or visibility on that level of thinking around this yet. So I guess trying to get that done, and then making sure the questions are actually articulated. I think there's probably a lot of questions out there that we could draw on to organize under the right, what problem are we trying to solve, what question are we trying to get answered, and then here's all the sub questions that are going to feed up to that, so that when we start to get responses, we know what we're asking and what we're tracking to. And if we need to, ask more questions at some point, we feel like there's a gap, we could do that. Is there a subcommittee process? That seems to me like almost like a working group that could break out and focus on this. Do we just create one?
I think you can. I'm looking at I'm gonna search the bylaws real quick, but I think as chair you have the power to create an ad hoc committee.
Great.
Let me check. Because I know that there were committees created specifically for the Percent for Art projects. The most recent one was the Public Works Operations building that was dissolved. So I say, why not?
Yeah. Who just right now, who wants to be part of that working? And those working sessions don't have to occur in this format, right? They can be offline. And
Through me.
Yeah.
Okay, through you. Okay.
And Krista is not yet a member, but I would imagine she can also volunteer pending.
Yeah, that was my question. I'd be happy to be part of this group. But yes, if
Okay.
that's not allowed yet, that's fine. But yeah, if it is, I'd absolutely be happy to be part of it.
Okay. If I recall, the city council meeting that approves you is happening this month. Is that right?
The 27th would be the soonest.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Thomas, you're raising your hand.
I just wanted to remind you that the subcommittee or ad hoc committee has to be less than a quorum of the whole commission.
Yep. So I guess that would, if we form it today, that would cap us at what, 3? How many of us are there?
Quorum would be 3.
Quorum would be 3, so it would have to be less than 3.
So it should be 2. Okay. But on the 27th, we can add a member to that committee and not violate.
Then you could have 3.
So maybe
We'll wait till next meeting to form this subcommittee.
let's do that. But let's put on the agenda that we want to form the subcommittee, that Susan and Barbara want to be part of it, and that Krista might also be part of it once she joins. Which would be before next meeting, so we can talk about this next meeting.
Sounds good. I'll put it on the agenda.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Okay. Action items. Drummer contract with Lee Immonen.
Yes, at the last meeting, there was interest to get this going again. So I talked to our purchasing agent person. She said we looked at what Lee provided. There was not a due date or an expiration date. So I'd like to reach out back to him to ensure that those are still the right prices and everything, and get an end date. And I was thinking maybe this would be a good time to create an ad hoc committee for maintenance, so that discussions can be taken care of behind the scenes, because I don't have that artistic background to work with Lee directly.
Okay. So sorry, let's say that again. I was reading the comments real quick. So you're going to reach out to Lee.
Yes, to make sure that the quotation that he gave us earlier is still valid, because it usually expires within 90 days, but there wasn't an expiration date on his estimate. And then at that point in time, maybe coordinate with one of the commissioners as a chair of a subcommittee to coordinate timelines or updates, photo updates, summaries, things of that nature that I'm not quite familiar with.
Okay. I can be part of that effort too. So-
Okay.
And Spencer.
Zach.
Perfect.
So there's our second to be TBD subcommittee.
Sounds
Okay.
good.
All right, we're gonna do things. We're gonna make things happen. I just want to read Lynn Takata's note in the chat regarding the questionnaire. She says multiple choice and open-ended questions can capture information that could be very helpful to SPAC. There are a range of ideas that may not be black and white. And I agree with that. I think it's probably good to have an opportunity to comment, or some questions that allow for that, in addition to some questions that are designed to, capture data that we can track. So, okay, so that's great. So sounds like we have a plan. We have several plans. And are there any additional comments, thoughts? Keith?
I do. Yes, it says commissioner comments, but I have a staff comment. There's no discussion needed for this, but 4 works of art have been added to the original inventory for the exhibit by John Coburn called Dreams at the library. And so I know this is not SPAC, and I know that I don't know where it is located, but because I'm managing the contract, I worked with Tom in legal and OSAF to execute that amendment. So that's all.
Okay, thanks.
I don't know if, Carol, go ahead, sorry.
So sorry, Carol, you're still on mute. There we go.
I should have said something at the public comment section, but I was looking at the minutes and saw that I had mentioned we were doing an Earth Day event on April 22nd at the Eco Earth Ball at the Rotary Amphitheater. We're not doing that after all. We realized we should have gotten started planning for that several months earlier, so we have canceled those plans.
All right, thanks for that update. Susan?
I did just want to bring up something, and I don't know if this is opening a can of worms or if it's something that we're gonna need to put on the agenda or whatever. There's been an uptick in a lot of tagging going on, especially in alleyways and on fences in alleyways that belong to individual property owners. And some of the property owners have taken to putting up murals of, simple geometric murals of their own to kind of counter the tagging that's been going on, and it seems to work. Now, those are on their own property, but if you look at the rules and regulations, really, there's no clear definition of or indication that they can do that they can't do that they're in danger of having the city come and paint it out. So I'd like some clarification. I don't know if Tom, if you can clarify that at any point, or if it's something that we look into, because neighbors are wondering whether that is something that they're allowed to do.
Well, again, without knowing the specific circumstance, they do run the risk of running afoul of the sign code. And so if someone were to complain about what they did, the code enforcement folks would come out and take a look at it and make a determination about whether or not they were in violation of the sign code.
Can you clarify what the sign code would say about
Well,
it?
the sign code goes on for 40 pages.
Well, the gist of the whatever it would be that would keep people from painting, let's say, the back of their garage or a fence.
I have some language from the sign people, if you don't mind me reading it.
Sure, go ahead.
All right. It says, and I asked the planners, Commissioner APAC wanted to know to know where a painting on private property fence would fall within city code. Would it be a public mural or a sign? And he says, sign means any structure, board, poster, placard, or device which contains or comprises a display designed, used, or intended to attract the attention of the public. If so, and the sign is visible from the public right-of-way and placed on a fence, it will be classified as a freestanding sign. If these are subject to Chapter 900, then there would be an issue with the size allowance. In residential zones, freestanding signs are limited to display surface not exceeding 1 square foot in size and no more than 30 inches in height. Keep in mind that we cannot regulate content, so if we were to change the sign code to allow a larger or unlimited display surface on residential fences for murals, this would also allow fences to be used for political messages and speech that some may find uncomfortable but would be protected by the First Amendment and the Oregon Constitution. Please let me know if you have any questions. So short answer is yes, it would be considered a sign.
Is it the concept of placard and whatever that those 3 words were affixed to? Does that somehow that seems distinct
Then a
from
painting.
from painting the surface of the thing itself? I mean, if I go out and paint my fence blue, no one's gonna have a problem with it, right?
Hmm.
So if I paint my fence blue and green, so I guess, Susan, my suggestion would be ask for forgiveness, not permission, and if it becomes a problem, it'll be a matter of degree. Like, I think you could probably paint your fence 3 different colors of stripes, and then you could crosshatch it with a plaid design, and you're not going to run into problems until you start to cross some fact specific scenario that's going to be really hard for us to talk about here. But if they're doing simple geometric designs on their alleyway fences, it seems, I don't know. Tom, do you have thoughts about that?
Well, this is of course the difficulty we have. I guess I would just want to be careful. SPAC is not the regulatory agency for that, and folks' opinion as they're expressing it here, wouldn't be the official position of the city, and so we're not going to be able to provide a lot of guidance here about whether a particular setting is a sign or not.
So I guess the conclusion is, depending on what they put on their fence, they could run the risk of running afoul of the sign code.
That is well put.
And so I'm not sure if I'm bringing more confusion, but when we get we're going to get applications again if the cherry growers would like to proceed with their painting of the additional structures. Now, if you review those additional structures, one just has a name of the company, no geometric shapes, or and so that's something that we would have to think about as well as a commission when we're approving something like that. Lynn has something.
Sorry?
Lynn has something in the comments.
In the chat.
I've had one mural that was approved by the sign code, another that was exempted by the sign code. My assumption is that the city does not search for non-compliance. The city could respond if there was a complaint.
That's correct. The city does code enforcement on a complaint basis type of system. So somebody has to come and complain to the city about something. But you would be amazed at the innocuous things that people complain about. So anytime you do something, someone is going to come along and say, "Gee, I don't like that." And so,
What would it take to develop I'm sorry, I don't mean to make this go on and on, but to develop some kind of an alley art program with guidelines so that this kind of thing could be not, perilous for people to, as an anti-tagging measure, because it really does work and it does beautify the alleys and the neighborhoods.
Well, we'd have to figure out what we want, figure out how to describe it.
So it could be that it could be proposed, let's say, by a neighborhood, the same way that the street painting program was kind of said, hey, we want to do a street painting, how do we do it? Maybe if the neighborhoods, a neighborhood sent a letter to the council or whatever and said, hey, we'd like to have an alley art program, how would we do it?
Sure, that'd be one way to have it happen.
I believe there is a alley painting program right now in the downtown area by the parkade. I know Electric, they've had some symbols down there on Electric Avenue.
Lynn, I see you have your hand raised.
Thank you very much. So I just wanted to add to this conversation because I've been working very hard to protect a park where we've had a murder and several people shot in the park. And one of the components of that is dealing with graffiti. We have some horrific pictures of fences adjoining public parks. And I checked in with the Chicago Public Art Commission. They've been leaders in public art work. They don't require that there's a permit for anything that's not on city property. So if a private property owner wants to hire a muralist, there's legal requirements that they have to go through, but the city does not get involved in that process. So I'm just advocating, I know Susan's been talking about this, for some kind of possible process where some of these community organized projects are not going to run afoul of the law, because the graffiti, for example, at Hoodview Park is horrific. And a lot of times the graffiti goes along with a lot of violence that happens at these locations. So anyway, that's just my plea that I hope the commission can, or the city can, figure out a way to streamline the process a bit.
So thank you. So
You're
Susan,
welcome.
it sounds like your suggestion of a neighborhood group coming up with a proposal for an alley art program, would be a first step towards getting that process defined. And then once it was defined, would give some security to people who wanted to use it, so that they would know what the parameters they could operate in are. There's a lot of prepositions in that sentence, right?
Yeah, maybe it could be not just alleys, but public, private fences like the one that Lynn is talking about is not necessarily in an alley, but it's, and I saw that graffiti, it was posted on Nextdoor. It was horrific.
Mhm.
So, and I think Eddie was saying that certain, that he's had a lot of experience. I don't know if you want to talk on that at all with, with the kind of respect for murals that some taggers might have that would kind of have them avoid, doing the tagging in that area.
Yeah, for the most part, the process of painting residential like wooden fences is not hard. Most gangbangers, like, they'll leave it alone when something is it. It's like a weird, like, unspoken rule of like the neighborhoods they grow up in. They don't touch it unless they're very young, and the really young ones are the ones that are been causing a lot of the violence in the neighborhoods nowadays. But it totally can be done, and I think it is, because there are residential fences that people I know have, they just keep getting vandalized, and then the city sends them a notice saying like, you need to paint over this or you're getting $1,000 fine. Like, they don't provide them the paint or anything, they're just like, paint over it, like, we don't want to see it. And then some people, like, paint does cost a lot, and if it's a big fence, like, it can run them something, you know what I mean? So I really do feel like painting or starting something, or just having a guideline, the artist will come. Like, the artist will come. It's not even just putting out like a message, people would just like sign up for it. But yeah, like the vandalism, especially the gang vandalism, is kind of getting out of hand.
So, yeah. Thank you. So yeah, I guess, bring it back again. I think that we're stepping a little bit outside of SPAC's purview here, but if a neighborhood group wants to come up with a proposal, that SPAC could then, and wants SPAC's input on that or support, I think bringing it to this group would be appropriate. And we could, talk about it in that context, and then, like with the Street Bureau program so sounds like a good idea. Everything people are saying here sounds like real problems that need solutions. So, yeah. Okay. Any other commissioner comments, thoughts, concerns? All right. So next meeting is in person. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's going to be exciting. We
Just
will have.
Sorry, Zach, one other thing, I'm sorry. About, has any movement happened on getting one of the counselors to be a liaison with SPAC? And inviting somebody?
No, if you would all like to invite the counselors, we can send invitations, or you can. We have not decided, or we only know that the city manager has an ex officio status or position with the committee, or the commission, but we haven't reached out to him in his current capacity yet.
We had just batted that around as to have someone as a liaison from the council. Is that something that we would want to follow up on before the April meeting to see if they would want to join us, or the city manager join us, or should we just kind of have the first meeting and then go from there? Or
I guess for me, that kind of rolls up into the stuff we were talking about earlier, which is it sounds like we're beginning to develop a kind of stakeholder plan of how to engage with leadership and new leadership that's being appointed right now, and how that is going to hopefully roll up into a proposal. I guess I'm not clear what we would be asking a city council member to do right now.
I think just to be, know what we're doing, what we're thinking about, just to kind of, basically be a liaison that for future, things that we would want to propose, but just to have some connection to the,
Well, Councilor Nishioka came to a few of our commission meetings as well, and her role with the mural on Front Street, but recuse herself from that process. But I mean, I could send an email out to the council if that's the wish, but I'm not sure if there's any interest.
I think, am I incorrect in hearing, in understanding that there had at one point been a counselor liaison to SPAC?
Not that I understand.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to it. I guess I would want to, be clear why we're doing it and what we're asking that person to do. And if are we asking them to come to every SPAC meeting or attend meetings occasionally when we're looking to communicate through them to council? What is that mechanism? What are we asking for? If we can put some definition around that, then maybe it makes sense to do that. I at this moment don't have an answer to those questions, so I'm not sure what I would be asking for.
Yeah, I guess it needs more discussion then.
So yeah, maybe we need to keep talking about that a little bit, but the time may come when we do want such a thing. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Any more commissioner comments?
I'm done now.
Okay, great. Well, next meeting is going to be in person, which is exciting. We'll have new members, I believe, hopefully by then, which will also be exciting. We'll have done this, this deputy manager meeting prior to that, so there'll be some things to talk about there. And we can start kind of, we can start up our subcommittees and sort of move into a more active phase as we head into the summer, which is exciting. So
Great.
thank everybody. Thanks everybody for coming.
You feel better, Barbara?
Yeah.
And I'm gonna go ahead and adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
In
Bye-bye.
April, in person.